Ask yourself the same question I'm asking on today's show. What is a successful season for the Ducks this fall?
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And you know what else today's show has? Rian Winter, Sports Chat 503, veteran Oregon Ducks fan, friend of the show. I don't think I have him on enough, quite frankly. Every time I bring him on, I think, you know what, we should do this more often. We'll talk about a lot of things today, including who's making an impact from the transfer portal, who's not, which transfers are just going to be just kind of guys out there, and thoughts on the skill positions on offense. But let's start with that question, Ryan. I pose to you, what's a successful season for Oregon in 2025?
Well, I think first and foremost, thanks so much for having me on. Love it. I think it's in the same boat as we were talking last year before they went on the run, right? I think most people were thinking of 2 losses, 1 loss. You're in that window. I think this next year the schedule works out very well for the Ducks. If you get past the early stage of the Penn State, you could be looking at a great opportunity. I mean, I think you're going into Penn State undefeated. So is Penn State. It's the biggest showcase game of the year, early in the year for the Big Ten. And then I think that if you win that game, just like you did with the Ohio State game last year, it's all systems go. And I think you're looking at a season where you maybe drop 1 game. Other than that, I think you could go through, technically, looking at this thing, it looks like you could go through the thing unscathed again.
You can. I can't put that expectation on a team that's led by Dante Moore, who I think is great. I really do. And I think he can be really, really good. Give me the last quarterback in his first full season starting, Ryan, no matter how many years he's been there, to go undefeated. Because, I mean, even if you think best case scenario with Dante Moore behind center this season, I think back to Marcus Mariota's first year. His first year starting was 2012, had that debut against Arkansas State, and we were kind of looking around going, how good is this guy? Well, it turns out he was pretty darn good. But he sat the prior year behind Darren Thomas, veteran quarterback, and then they knew, this is going to be the guy. Darren Thomas left the program, and you kind of have that here with Dante Moore. Obviously, Dylan Gabriel graduated, but he sits behind a veteran for a year, really talented kid. Dante was a higher profile recruit than Mariota was, but even in that season, with Mariota being that good right away, Ryan, they still found a way to lose a game that, they easily could have won, and Stanford was really good, but that's kind of how I look at the Penn State game is Dante Moore in his first season, like, you would be cementing yourself into legendary status right away if you in your first year starting go on the road to one of the preseason top 3 or 4 teams in the country and walk away with a win in what could be a whiteout game.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what I say is, like, I really didn't know about how they were going to play in that Ohio State game this last year. As soon as they answered that bell and they were back and forth in a 1-point game at halftime, I said, okay, we're in this thing. It could be in a similar situation with the Penn State. The Ohio State game last year told me a lot about that Duck team last year. And I think the Penn State team will do the same thing. I think the Penn State game, what's different about the Penn State game, I think all the pressure's on them. I think they have got a lot going on this next year. I think they're going to have a bunch of guys coming back. I think there's going to be a lot of expectations. This is going to be an early game. We know how these early games, the first month, especially the first couple games of the Big Ten schedule. To me, the other game that's going to be surprising that people wouldn't think is that big of a game, it's the first one out of the gate, Montana State, buddy. You better put your helmet on for that one, man. I'm telling you, the first quarter, there's going to be some Duck fans who are like, wait a minute. What's happening? I think the Ducks win the game easily. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. But you know how first games are. You got a bunch of stuff happening. If you get through that game smooth and easy, you get on to the next. I think Oklahoma State, Northwestern. I think both games you can win those games. Play those pesky Beavs at home. It sets up for an unreal game at Penn State. And if they can put themselves in a game like they did in this Ohio State game where they kept it close and find a way to win it at the end, that'd be fantastic. Now, let's say they lose that Penn State game. What would be then the barometer for the second half of the season, knowing that you can't really drop another one, or maybe you can only drop one more?
I think you could drop one more. 10-2 Big Ten SEC. Maybe it's schedule dependent, but we also don't know what everyone's going to be, right? On paper, Washington and USC are a couple of 6-win teams right now. But by the time they play Oregon, if I tell you one of those teams is a top 20 win, that doesn't shock me. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all. But I got to thinking about this subject about success, Ryan, because I got a mailbag question. This came in a while back from Duck2081A. Appreciate your patience and waiting to have it answered here on the show. My question would be, if you don't make the Big Ten championship game, but make the semis of the playoff and lose, would you consider that a successful season, 12-3 record? I'd say yes. It's not the season that we're looking for, but I'm not going to look at an appearance in the college football playoff semifinal, Ryan, and ever say, even if I have national championship hopes, like Oregon this past year, they could have won the national championship. They were good enough. Well, guess what? They didn't. I didn't view that as a failure of a season. The Rose Bowl was a failure of a game. It's not a failure of a season holistically. So if they were to go 10-2, get a home playoff game and win that, and then go to the quarterfinal and win that, and then lose to, I don't know, maybe even a Penn State or a Texas or Ohio State again, or somebody like that in a competitive game, yeah, it's still a successful season. It's just not the one that we're waiting for.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. Look at Ohio State, right? Ohio State has the one loss against Oregon, the best team in the conference, the two best teams in the conference. They're playing on the road. They lose by 1 point. They get down to the wire, and they come up with their worst game of the year against Michigan. And then they get into the playoff. They get hot in the playoff, and they win the thing. I don't think I do know that there are Buckeye fans that are still mad about the Michigan game, but I don't think any Buckeye fan at the end of the year after winning national championships worried about those other two losses. And so, like you said, I think if you get to the point where
you search in the right corner of the internet, my friend, you can find them.
You will. There's still somebody who wants to fire Ryan Day. They're like, they shouldn't have done the extension. But my point being is that if you get to the playoff, it's a successful year in any shape or form, in my opinion. And I don't know what that's going to look like in the future with the 16 team, or if they go to a 24 team in the future. We don't even know what the future holds. But my point being is if with those four, if they're going to go from this model right now, where it feels like you got to be at least in the top two, if they go to the four automatic qualifiers, I think Oregon's going to be in the conversation most years. So the idea is what's a good season and what's not a good season. To me, it's all about the playoff. If you get to the championship game again next year, that'd be phenomenal. I still love the championship game. I still think that's a valuable thing. But the way that Dan Lanning is working right now, it feels like he's working that way up the ladder. I would love to see them come out with a big year next year. I think the schedule suits them. The last two games kind of scare me because it's old Pac-10, old Pac-12 style foes. I think USC might have something for them at the end of the year. USC doesn't play that well at the end of the year, so hopefully that'll work out for Oregon. But Washington's kind of scares me at all times. So it's going to be an interesting year. I just think that I would never say to any team that they should be undefeated. I would never put that on anybody, especially in today's modern day college football. Where
I said that about Oregon last year, kind of. Not in like this is a failure if you're not, but I predicted them to go 12-0, and they did. I will not be doing that with this team.
Great. I expected them to lose a game last year, or maybe even two. I was surprised when they beat Ohio State, though. It kind of changed my tune a little bit. I thought, okay, well, now it feels like you could run the table. That's kind of what I feel about this next year with Penn State.
Yeah, I think that game's going to be fantastic and hard, and
I'm going to try to go to it.
I think it's going to be stress-free viewing for me, because I'm going to go into it going, you know what? If you win this game, great. If you lose,
that's kind of what I think. That's kind of why I think the pressure's on them, because they've got everybody coming back. They've got a great system. They've got a great, they've proven
and they
it.
just went to the semifinal, right? They got further than Oregon, even though they lost to the Ducks in the Big Ten championship game. I agree that in that spot, the pressure is squarely on Penn State. But we're going to bring this back to Oregon for a moment, because we're going to the portal, and I want Ryan's thoughts, because he's the wily veteran guest that I bring on here in Locked On Ducks. Which transfers are making an impact? Which ones are not making an impact? That is next. First, a reminder, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action, it's just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your bets into a same-game parlay. Plus, I talk a lot of college football on the show and over on Locked On College Football as well. And guess what? If you want to bet on college football, you can already bet games, win totals, conference title odds, national championship odds, Heisman odds. They're all over there at FanDuel.com. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Ryan, let's talk some transfers here, because whenever Oregon adds a player in the portal, the internet goes insane. You know, every kid has gotten $7 million to come and play for one season, and he was contacted no earlier than the previous team's second game of the year, which is against every rule ever, and something else illegal also happened in there, right? So when Oregon has gone to the transfer portal in the last couple of cycles, though, and I've talked about this before here on the show, there is not a 100% hit rate of impact guys. Not everyone transfers over and then is automatically a start. Most of them are, but trying to search through the weeds a little bit and figure out, well, who's making an impact, who's just kind of there, it's not easy. It's not easy because you can easily see a world where it goes this way or it goes that way. But I want to start with Malik Benson. And the reason I highlight him as a transfer that might not have a huge impact this year is he's coming into a stupidly talented room. It's not proven, it's not veteran, but I don't question that he can on any given day be the fifth most talented guy in that room. If DeCorian Moore pops, like I take Evan Stewart over Malik Benson. He's far more proven at the Power 4 level. DeCorian Moore could pop and be better. Justice Lowe's a really talented guy. You still have Jurion Dickey, Jeremiah McLaughlin, Kyler Casper in there. Like, he could get way down, and Gary Bryant Jr., or he could be the second or third best receiver. What do you think?
I agree. I think that it's all about the room you find yourself in. I also think there's a new thing the Ducks are doing with like the alien spaceship where they just bring the thing down into the laser beam. They just take the kid right out of the school that they're in, shoo, over to Eugene, tractor laser beam it right back down into the HTC. No, I think it's, portal's changing. There's so many more kids now in it. It's I don't know. I wouldn't say it's being diluted, but it feels like it's being utilized now at a rate that was never before utilized. You're never going to get 100% success rate. You can't. I think Dan Lanning hits pretty good numbers on it so far. Him and the team do a really good job. And I think Marshall Malkow is one of the main guys on that because he's one of those guys who's identifying pieces to the puzzle. And that's why it feels like sometimes it happens so quickly. It's because these guys have already been identified. They're already on the big board. And as soon as they have their opportunity, it's laser beam central. They send the alien spaceship over there and they, do that whole thing. And the idea to me is that whatever room a guy finds himself in is going to be how successful they're going to be. You look at a guy like Tez Johnson, right? Had immediate success when he came out here. I mean, right out of the gate. I mean, set records. And it's just an unbelievable situation. So, you look at a guy like him, and if you're a wide receiver, say, well, I can do that. I can be one of these guys who's an impact player on day one. And I think anybody who's in the transfer portal has that mindset of, I'm going to go be that explosive player. But you're right. I think that if you think about who the guys are that could maybe, not hit huge number, of snaps at least. It could be that room because of there's so many guys in the wide receiver room. I would also say on the defensive side, you had two cornerbacks join this class, and I don't know what you're going to get with those cornerbacks. I don't know if you're going to maybe see one go to safety or move around a little bit because, again, those guys are kind of versatile. But, a lot of people were kind of talking about how maybe that there's going to be a little bit of a battle there between those two corners. So, again, the guy who I'm hoping is going to be a big hit is Bear Alexander. I think everybody wants the big defensive lineman to be the guy. And I think everybody's kind of seen the track record from Bear and said, hey, can he be the guy who we think he is? And I would love to see that be the guy for Oregon this year to really blow up. I think both starting offensive tackles will play. I think they'll fill the gaps very quickly. I don't think anybody who's going to come in as a transfer portal guy is going to come to sit. But I do think there's going to be some competition to be able to get some of those spots, like you said, with some of the guys who are already here.
Yeah, I think that interior D-line unit is one of the most important things for Oregon to have success with in 2025 on that side of the ball, because if you didn't ever fully appreciate how good Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell were, I think Oregon fans did. Those two guys were I mean, Ryan, among the best D-tackle tandems Oregon has had roll through in the past, really in my life. Because
Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner.
But here's the thing, Defoe played outside.
I mean, he did, but I'm just saying on the level of like what those two dudes stood up a lot of lines. And what happened during their time? They went to the national championship.
Yeah, of course. And I think DeForest Buckner is like Jordan Birch. Primarily plays as an edge, but can line up on the interior as well, at least in their college careers. I think Defoe's done that in the NFL as well. Eric Armstead, by the way, Walter Payton Man of the Year. How about that in the NFL? So that's awesome.
I've seen DeForest Buckner go back into coverage.
Yeah. You don't see that. You don't see that very often. I've also seen Jordan Birch return a fake punt all the way down the field. That's the clip that always flies around on Twitter anytime someone talks about his draft profile is, hey, look, this guy is 6'5", 290, and he moves like a running back.
Remember they did the same thing the year before with Casey Rogers, because Casey Rogers' dad had that exact same play and wheeled off the same big 60-yard run. They're like, dang, this guy's athletic.
Yeah, but the difference was that, Birch kind of had to make a guy miss. He kind of juked him and stiff-armed him
right out of the gate. No, Casey Rogers was absolutely as open as you could.
Yeah, wide open. You or I maybe could have run through that hole. Yeah. But Birch had to make a move.
Birch had to juke a guy.
It was awesome. But again, going back to the DTs, I'm glad you brought up Bear Alexander, because kind of a wild card on the defensive line. He was at USC and then had a good year in 23, and then in 24, played a couple games, decided I don't want to be here. And look, from the outside, if I were a fan of a different program, maybe USC's, I'd say Oregon tampered with this kid. Look at what happened.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe. Newsflash. Everyone
tampers. But it
also
felt like USC was a freaking tire fire during half the year. There's a bunch of things happening there.
Yeah,
no, I agree. And I also think that there was also with any of these transfer portals, there's already previous relationships built years before. They were recruiting these guys out of high school. There's already been these conversations that are had. These guys reach out to the coaches just as much. So it's one and the same. Yeah.
Well, Lanning recruited Alexander when he was the DC at Georgia, and he was coming out in the class of 22. So that's been, a relationship that is well founded at this point. But Alexander hasn't had a year where he's hit his full potential. No. But Oregon's defense will take a major step back if he and Amari Washington are not at least 80% of the production you got from Caldwell and Harmon. I mean, I don't think anyone can be Harmon, at least not right now. I think Washington could be that good in 26 maybe. Maybe he takes that step forward this year. But Harmon was, he's going to get drafted in the first round for a reason. But those two guys are so important. I think your edge production, you lose Birch, that's a loss. But Purchase is back in the fold. Tuioti's there. Mateo, another step forward. I feel more secure about what the floor looks like on that unit. But for the interior of the defensive line, I don't feel quite as confident.
No, young guys are going to be playing in the middle.
100%.
You just and anytime you have young guys in the middle in the line, it's susceptible, man. I mean, you don't know. You could have a breakout year. You could have a big year. You could have, guys play well like their freshman, like Jordan Scott. We didn't know what we were going to get out of him, right? But
he was awesome.
Yeah, dude. I mean, his freshman year blew up. I thought almost like his freshman year was his best year. So you never know. I hope that what Bear gets from the U of O is some stability behind his position group, not only, but also the fact that he can come in and be a leader and guys can gravitate toward him a little bit. He's got good personality. So I just think that the main objective for the Ducks this year is that we got to see that Dan Lanning offense or Dan Lanning defense in full swing. That the idea that you need to put a lot of pressure on a quarterback, be able to still stop everything up the front, and be one of the best defenses in this conference. I think if you're one of the best defenses in the conference, even with an average to better than average offense that you'll have, which I'm assuming you'll have at Oregon, I think you'll be right in the window.
Yeah, and I think for the most part we saw that defense this past year. Certainly in the biggest games, they need to be better. Every playoff team they played scored at least 34 points, and that's an area for improvement. But I mean, this is the same defense that pitched a shutout at Purdue, held Illinois, a good team, to 9 points, that, you know, just was dominant against everybody else the rest of the year, which is what you do. But again, there's still a step forward, and I think that 2026 defense could just be, I think it could be better than 24 and the best that they've had. Ryan looks like he has a thought on that question, which he does, but we're going to get to that right after this. All right, Ryan is not done talking about the defense yet, so I wanted to give him the floor. He's the guest, and my parents taught me to be a gracious host. So, Ryan, your lingering thought on Oregon's defense was?
Well, no, I just think that if you look at the way they played the whole season versus the last 3 quarters of the Big Ten championship and the first quarter of the Rose Bowl, you take those 4 quarters out of it, and you'll be okay. I think that Penn State really turned it on in the second half of that Big Ten championship game. And then, of course, we all know what happened in the first quarter of the Rose Bowl. And other than that, I think the defense played pretty tight most of the whole year. So you got to give credit where credit's due. The defense is getting better. I just think that next year it's about defense wins championships. If you're going to win a championship, I think it's going to be on the defensive side.
Yeah, those quarters do unfortunately count. And that's why that's why I point out that, that's the area for growth defensively is, hey, in the biggest games, have better game plans or execution or whatnot. But I don't think they were lacking in personnel last year as much as they were just in game planning and play calling. They got out-coached. Everywhere that you looked, they got out-coached, out-schemed, offensively, defensively, like just everything. And that happens, unfortunately, sometimes. Steve Spagnuolo, great. Not good, great. Hall of Fame defensive coordinator. Just gave up 41 points in a Super Bowl. Happens, man. Happens, even to the best of them. But, Ryan, I want to flip to the offensive side of the ball to wrap today's show and get your thoughts on the running back and wide receiver rooms. We'll go one question each. Is Makhi Hughes going to run for more yards than Jordan James did in 2024?
Good question. I don't think so. I think Noah's going to eat into some of his yardage. I think Noah Winnington's going to have a pretty substantial year this next year.
Would you like to know how many yards James ran for this past year?
600, 700, something like that.
Jordan James?
Yeah.
Ran for 1,184.
Oh, I'm sorry. What? I was thinking of Noah Winnington. Noah was out. What did Noah have?
I can double check, but 1184.
Yeah,
do you think Makhi Hughes goes over that?
I was kind of thinking Makhi Hughes right around 1,000 yards. Again, I don't know, because from what I've seen on tape, he looks great and it looks like he's going to be a great fit. But I don't know if Noah Winnington stays healthy the whole year and plays the majority of the games this whole year. I think they're going to give him the rock quite a bit. I think you're going to split a lot of those carries. So I don't know. I could see that. I could see Makhi Hughes though doing things that I'm not expecting him to do.
Yeah, Whittington, by the way, went for 540 this past year on a career worst 4.6 yards a carry. He averaged 2.4 his first year at Western Kentucky, but he only had 16 carries that season, so it wasn't exactly a sample size. But in the years where he has seen a significant role, 4.6 yards a carry was the worst that Noah Whittington has had so far in his career as a college football player at both Western Kentucky and Oregon. I'd imagine that. I hope it's back over 5. And by the way, that 4.6 from a year ago factors in the first half of the year where Ryan, I think you and I agree, he was not himself.
Not even close.
And then he kind of popped a little bit more.
Yeah. And they weren't utilizing him in any way, shape, or form. They were throwing him out of the backfield more than anything, and that's his kind of his specialty. But yeah, no. If he comes into this year how I think he's going to be, I mean, I just saw him last week at the Nike event. It looked great, looked healthy. He felt good. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the psychological stuff, but he always kind of felt a little guarded. Whenever I saw him, whenever I talked with him, he always kind of felt like he really wasn't quite accepted to being here. And so that times that happens as a transfer portal guy. And I'm just speaking on it from the fan perspective of interacting with him. He was all of it this time. He was all in his element. He was feeling good about himself. I feel like he's going to really try to get after this next year. I think Makhi Hughes is, though, the number one back. I think it's going to be Makhi Hughes getting the majority of the carries, but I do think that Noah's going to run between the tackles a little more this year than he did last year.
Yeah, and I just like to see him, look like the guy that was great against Purdue when James was banged up, or ran over a safety at Illinois, or is making those lateral cuts that we came to know in the 22 season. Like, it's kind of crazy that he's going into his fourth year with the Ducks. I feel like he's still kind of a newer guy, but time flies when you're having fun.
And also I said Jaden Lamar. Jaden Lamar really kind of came on at the last part of last year and put when he was in the game, put some good runs together. So wouldn't be surprised to see him take carries as well. I don't know if I'll see the amount of carries. It felt like Jordan James was the major bell cow last year.
Yeah, he was, and I think he deserved to be in that particular role. I wonder if for the first time since 2022 we see a real third running back dynamic. I guess they were going to do that in 23, but then Whittington got hurt and it was just Bucky and James. But I'll wrap with a question to you on the wide receiver room.
Yeah.
DeCorian Moore has more receiving yards than either Gary Bryant Jr. or Malik Benson, who are both in their 5th or 6th year of college football.
Okay, so with Malik Benson, I'm not sure. I have to pump the brakes a little bit because I've heard some kind of like conflicting reports, right? I've heard some things that he's really a great player. I've heard some things that maybe he there's some deficiencies there. We'll try to work them out. I think Gary Bryant Jr. is a guy who can really, really do some damage. I feel like he's going to have a really explosive year. I think he's going to get a lot of yardage. I think he's going to get a lot of yards after the catch. I think he's going to be the number one guy that they're looking to as a deep threat as well. I think DeCorian Moore is going to play early and often, and I think he's going to get reps. I just don't think he'll ever get the number that the other older guys are going to get. I think Justice Lowe as well is going to get a pretty good amount of numbers and snaps for him. I hope Jerrion Dickey does.
Me too.
I mean, wow, wouldn't that be awesome? So Evan Stewart,
it just feels like Oregon fans have been waiting for him for the last couple of years. And, retroactively, you go back to 23 when he was recruited, and we've, since learned, he was injured. So he wasn't actually able to play. But would he have played with that receiver room with Troy Franklin, Tez Johnson? I probably not. And then this past year, by all accounts, I believe he was healthy, got dinged up in the spring game, but I think he was fine.
Yeah.
And again, was not seeing the field, and like Oregon's just had so much talent there. But you would have thought, at least on paper, that Jerrion was one of those guys that would rise to the top because he does everything.
Yeah, and he's big. When I stand next to him, he's big.
Oh, he's chiseled.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, like he's absolutely. And so he kind of feels like he's the Trayshawn Holden type of model where you've got a bigger wide receiver you're looking for. You got to try to find that role, and there's sometimes only one of those guys out there. Whereas they'll roll Evan Stewart out there, Gary Bryant Jr. out there. They'll roll a variety of their smaller guys out there. Only really run with the one bigger guy. I think Kyler Casper is another guy who could be really interesting. Battled with an injury this last year. Has a body type that there's no other guy like that in the room. And again, kind of those weird tweeners. It almost looks like a light tight end or a really big wide receiver. Those guys do really well in the modern game when they're throwing the ball the way they're throwing it. And I feel like Dante is going to throw the ball a lot this year. I think, this last year, Dylan Gabriel was very comfortable handing the ball off. And I feel like in the offense early on, especially, they wanted to really establish that. I think they're going to open it up. I think they're really going to start to throw the ball because I feel like Dante gives them a different perspective than Dylan Gabriel did. Because I feel like he sees the field a little bit different than Dylan Gabriel. I feel like Dylan Gabriel had to get out of the pocket to really throw how he wanted to. Yeah, Dante Moore can stand back there and throw it however he wants.
Yeah, Gabriel's a smaller guy, so I think the middle of the field was not utilized as often. It's not like they never threw the ball there, but I think that is something you could see incorporated more. But again, Dylan Gabriel did a lot of things well. I think my only disagreement on what you said about the receiver room, I think Evan Stewart's the primary deep threat. You
I
know,
agree.
Gary Bryant Jr. is clearly coming back for some reason. I don't know what that is, because again, this is a really crowded room, but maybe it's going to be, hey, veterans over young guys once again, which I know will frustrate some Oregon fans that want to see these really talented high school recruits get a chance to play. But Evan Stewart is a guy that, man, I'd probably pick him as Oregon's leading receiver right now going into 2025.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I would assume he's probably going to be 1,000-yard receiver or close. The reason why I say Gary Bryant's going to have such a breakout year is I think there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on everybody else, and especially as good as Dante Moore is, people are really going to watch for him when he lines up. You saw the effect of some of these freshmen that came out this last year were just absolutely so good. But no, you're right. Evan Stewart is by far the best wide receiver. That's why I didn't really even talk about him very much, because I thought he was the obvious choice. But Gary Bryant Jr. feels like going to have a big year, because I think what he can do in the offense is very important. He's more the dink and dunk guy, and I think he's going to be able to catch some of those, defenses off guard a little bit with the normal dink and dunk stuff. And then they go over the top of a little bit. I think they did that last year. They looked for Tez in a variety of ways. I feel like Evan Stewart's going to be more of that role. But you're still the Will Stein offense is very versatile, and there's a lot of options. So I think the ball is going to be in the air. A lot of these guys are going to get a lot of catches.
I think a lot of Oregon fans, myself included, would like to see DeCorian just slide into Tez's spot.
Absolutely.
Just, hey, you're the premier slot guy. Don't ever run a route more than 15 yards down the field, and we're going to give you a bunch of option routes, and you're so quick, and you're such a good route runner. Just go cook everyone. And we're going to get you the ball in space and let you go yards after the catch, and every now and then we'll work in a scramble drill as well. And every now and then we work in Rian Winter. Sports Chat 503 on YouTube and Twitter as well. Appreciate it as always, my man. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.